Today is a momentous day in South Carolina.
We are the paintbrushes on the canvases. We are the hands that sculpt the legacy of tomorrow. And if we don't do it, who will do it?
Come on.
We at Death Penalty Action are excited to support South Carolinians for alternatives to the death penalty because we know that the death penalty is the ugly residue of racism, the descendant of lynchings.
Making America great again, that means restoring humanity in our society. And you don't restore humanity by being barbaric.
We shouldn't have the opportunity to pick and choose whose lives matter. We're trying to fight violence. We can't perpetuate violence in the goal of trying to stop violence, and that's exactly what the death penalty does.
When it comes to our grassroots, our communities, there's no greater voice than the voice of people when they come together, unified in purpose and in mission.
Hopefully the governor will abolish the death penalty and get these guys off of death row so that South Carolina can move forward with their lives and go on. No more death in South Carolina.
And we can do better. South Carolina will be more beautiful without the death penalty.
SCADP.org is where people can come and learn about South Carolinians for alternatives to the death penalty. There's so many different people with different ideologies that come together with this one issue, and so that's why we think that's really important and that we can actually get the job done here in South Carolina to end it.
And welcome. Thank you all for being with us. My name is Abe Bonowitz with Death Penalty Action, and we are here on the first Sunday of the month. And often we will shift this when it's on a holiday weekend. But this, it is, for those of you who are outside of the United States, it's Labor Day weekend, and this is a lot of people are just not even focused today, but they're because we have less than 4 weeks before, well, just 3 weeks or 2 weeks from this Friday is a 6-day period with possibly 5 executions. We wanted to make sure to give people as much time as possible, and that's where we're at tonight. So we're going to focus tonight on what's happening with the upcoming executions as we approach this little execution spree and this resumption of executions for the first time in yet another state, the third state. We're going to be talking about this. We're expecting any time now. Let me just see if she's over there in the audience instead of no, not yet. So let me send a text over to Hillary Taylor from South Carolinians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. She is expected to join us anytime now. And meanwhile, I want to invite the folks that are here with us right now to just do a brief introduction. So Rick Halpern, a brief introduction for yourself, and then Charles.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Abe. I am Rick Halpern. I am the director of the Human Rights Program here in Dallas at Southern Methodist University and a longtime member of Amnesty International and the co-founder here of Human Rights Dallas.
Thank you. Charles Keith.
We unmute there. Charles Keith, Death Penalty Action, Impacted Communities Liaison. I interact with families in the communities that are those are about to be executed, and friends and people like that. So it's kind of like a wraparound with me in the middle, and I try to lend my experiences and things that I've learned to those families to try to help them, guide them as best I can through the death penalty process.
And myself.
Ooh, sorry, wrong button. Hi everyone. I'm Allie Sullivan. I'm Death Penalty Actions Communications Coordinator. I am also very active in communicating with folks on death row. That's how I was drawn into this work. And you'll hear a little bit later, but I am in communication with Khalil, who is scheduled to be executed in South Carolina, but a little more on that later.
Thank you. Just sending a quick note over to your folks in Missouri as well. Hillary is going to be on in just a couple of minutes. So actually what we'll do now is start with a couple of the executions that we have less to talk about. And I want to mention that in a moment. Just sending this text here because we're all out celebrating the weekend here. So we've got 5 executions, and one of the reasons why we asked Rick Halpern to make sure to be here with us is because we're in a countdown mode. This is the execution that just took place on Thursday. This past week was of Lauren Cole in Florida, was the 1595th execution since 1977. The new death penalty laws, well, all the death penalty laws in the United States were struck down in 1972 with the Furman versus Georgia decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. A lot of people call it a moratorium, but really it was the death penalty continued to exist. The states started to write new laws almost immediately. Florida had a special session of the death penalty in November of 1972, and within a couple of years there were hundreds of people on death row, and those new laws were upheld on July 2nd, 1976, and then the first execution was on January 17th, 1977. And since then, there's been a total of 1,595 executions. And, you know, nobody's a number. And we hate to be in accounting mode, except that there's a lot of attention often paid to round numbers. I will share with you that the first round number execution was that of Flint Gregory Hunt, for me, the 400th. The first time I was outside of a prison on a round number execution was in Maryland in the late 1990s when Flint Gregory Hunt was executed, and he was the 400th. And now we're approaching 1,600, and we could possibly hit that this month if all 5 of the currently scheduled executions actually take place, and otherwise it'll happen sometime in the next few. So there's several executions that might not happen. We'll be talking about those. It looks like we'll be able to take these in order tonight, and then we'll have some thoughts and some comments and get your ideas about what might be done around this round number execution. But first, I want to welcome and thank Reverend Hillary Taylor for being with us. Unfortunately, Hillary has the distinction of being the executive director of South Carolinians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty when they're going to resume executions for the first time in over a decade. And this is the third state this year to attempt to resume executions. So I said unfortunately, Hillary, but really we're grateful and very fortunate to have you at the helm at SCADP. So welcome to the forecast, and we'll go straight to you and invite you to share with us what's happening, what's being done, how can people help, what are your concerns, and what are your needs?
Thank you, Abe. I really appreciate that. Hi, friends. My name is Reverend Hillary Taylor. I have a background being a United Methodist minister, and I'm from South Carolina, which is why I'm here and I care about it. And I am, as Abe said, the executive director of South Carolinians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. So not this past Friday, but the Friday before, we got some pretty terrible news that Khalil Allah, who is formerly known as Freddie Owens in media across the US and the globe, he got an execution date. We were not expecting him to get an execution date, honestly. We were expecting other people another person to be scheduled first, because there were other people who had run out of their appeals process before Khalil did. So that was unexpected, and it felt like an intentional kind of decision on the part of SCDC, the South Carolina Department of Corrections. Khalil is somebody who is less sympathetic in some ways than some other people who have typically had execution dates scheduled before him. So that is kind of the long and short of it, or at least our theory of the case. You're meeting Twister right here, who is also, she's posed with abolitionist, where I'm not exactly sure if she's an abolitionist, but we're working on her. She's one of our cats here in South Carolina. So back to Khalil. Right now, he seems to be in good spirits. We are in constant communications with his lawyers, and they have filed all kinds of petitions. And we are expecting to have a press conference sometime soon. We'll definitely put more information about that on a press release sometime this week. We are, again, if I can lean on some of my faith-based training, if you are somebody who's a praying person, we would certainly love for you to be praying, but we also need people to pray with their feet. So I see that Ali is posting some things in the chat. You can connect with us at www.scadp.org. You can also find a bit.ly link if you go to our Facebook page, our X/Twitter page. If you go to our Instagram page, you can find us at SCA Death Penalty. We're also on LinkedIn too, and on Threads. On our webpage, you can go to our advocacy page, and that way you can sign up to resist Khalil's execution. We are hoping to get 5,000 plus signatures by December 19th, so that we can present the petition on the day of the execution to Governor McMaster. This petition is asking Governor McMaster to please stop executions. The simple fact about Governor McMaster is that he was the Attorney General of South Carolina for many years. In fact, while many of the people who have currently run out of their appeals process, while many of them were going through their trials or through their appeals, sort of the first round of post-conviction relief. So he is somebody who is invested in the death penalty. He's invested in the death penalty for these particular people. And recently said that, the death penalty is the law and it must follow the law. And this is what a governor does. When we know that that's just not true. There are plenty of governors who have said, the death penalty doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve us well. It actually takes away some much needed resources for some other really important initiatives like alleviating poverty or fighting addiction or creating effective public safety methods and procedures and protocols. And so this continues to be our message here in South Carolina with SCADP, is we would literally do better spending this money on the death penalty on anything else. Khalil's case is interesting. His lawyers are, again, extremely talented humans, and they will be filing petitions like crazy. If you are somebody who is a faith leader, we would love for you to sign on a particular petition that we have for faith leaders. That I will post that in the link in the chat within the next couple of minutes. I think that those are all of the main updates we have for right now. Again, we're working closely with the legal team to see what strategies make sense as far as the best next steps. So sign up for our newsletter. That way you can be sure to keep up with everything that we've got going on. You can sign up for our newsletter at scadp.org/newsletter. And Abe, thanks for having us on. We really appreciate giving the update.
Of course, there's a few questions that have come up, and I'll also note that Ali has been popping a bunch of different links into the chat for folks, so check that. And Ali had something to add too. But in the Q&A, we've got a question from Abu Masin, who was a regular with us, and he's just asking about the choosing of a method of execution. So there's that question. And also in the chat, we have some questions about the religious practices of people who are practicing Muslims, being respected in South Carolina. And that, of course, goes hand in hand with the question about the choice of being forced to choose. I know one thing is that they have Khalil has assigned his power of attorney to his attorney, so she has the burden of choosing. Anyway, anything you want to add about these questions?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So Khalil's name is not officially recognized by the Department of Corrections, which is, part of the prejudice against certainly Muslim people, but also part of the racism that a lot of people experience within SCDC. So it's important to call out all of those things. My understanding is that there is a Muslim chaplain connected to SCDC. I do not have my understanding is that Khalil's religious needs are more or less met. That is something that I'm extremely attentive to. Again, because I'm a Methodist minister, and one of the first things I did when I became connected to South Carolina's death row is I said, hey, A, let me know if you need a pen pal. B, let me know if you need any kind of spiritual advisor. I'm here to support you. I can't be a chaplain to everybody, but I can connect you to the right person for you. So that is something that we already have hands down. And so I'm trusting that he is getting all of the spiritual support that he needs. He has a wonderful, legal team, and the person who is his power of attorney is somebody who A, has worked on his case before, and B, is somebody who he considers a trusted confidant. So Khalil believes that choosing an execution method, and I believe he has to choose it by September 5th, all of the people on South Carolina's death row have to choose a method of execution approximately 2 weeks before their execution date. So that is just something that, as you're paying attention to South Carolina's process, this is an important kind of timeline piece that will, I'm sure, make the news. His power of attorney will be making that decision for him because he believes that choosing his own execution method will be participating in his own suicide, which is an important kind of pro-life, stance, right? South Carolina is an interesting place in that, many elected officials call it one of the most pro-life states in the United States. But if we're really so pro-life, we can't just care about the lives of the unborn. We have to care about the lives of everybody, including people who have caused profound harm. And Khalil is somebody who was let down, to say it very nicely, by systems here in South Carolina. In fact, he there was no intervention, little to no intervention for him when he experienced violence in his first family, but also in the South Carolina juvenile correctional system. He was physically abused, he was sexually abused, and these are things that we know, that we have documentation about. And and still the state wants to murder him, but murdering him effectively kind of lets the state off, scot-free, and kind of gets rid of the evidence of all the ways that we as a state just refuse to support life, and refuse to support human flourishing, especially for people who live in under-resourced communities and families. So Khalil deserves to live. These are only a few of the talking points that we are set to release sometime very soon. I believe within this next coming week. South Carolina has a history of sentencing to death people who, are teenagers of color. Obviously, George Stinney Jr. is kind of the primary example, 14-year-old child who was killed by the state for the alleged murder of 2 young white children. The only thing that really tied him to those murders was that he was the last person to see them alive, but it's very likely that the person who actually killed those children was the person who blamed it on George Stinney Jr. He was arrested, tried, convicted, and executed within 83 days. And so in the coming days and weeks, you'll be seeing more information about how there's something about South Carolina that really just, it's the racism of this space, our historical, the stuff that we just still can't get over, and stuff that we actually need to confront and do better about. And so, yeah, that's just a little bit of what I can tell you right now. And stay tuned, like I said, and thank you, Allie, for posting all of those links.
Well, thank you, Lori. Let's see if we can. I see that Gabriela Wells out in California had a question. Do you still want to ask your question, Gabriela? I'm going to set that up so you can ask your question out loud if you want to unmute. Maybe she didn't mean to have her hand up. So other panelists have any comments or questions for Reverend Hillary Taylor before we move on? Well, Hillary, you've been very thorough. Stick around if you can, because we're going to have a conversation about what happens in when we get to 1600. And one of the things about South Carolina is that was one of my early arrests, along with a number of others of us who sat in the road and blocked the entrance to the prison on the occasion of the 500th execution quite some time ago. So next we have the execution, just taking them in order. The next execution that's scheduled at the both on the same time. We've got Travis Mullis in Texas, and at the same time, if it happens, Marcellus Williams in Missouri, who goes by Khalifa, another person who has adopted Islam as his faith. And I'm just dropping the chat here. Maybe Allie, you could do this too. The MADP webpage, and I'm going to actually share that because unfortunately, both of the folks that normally come to this event with us from Missouri are unavailable this evening, as one would expect. As soon as you get to madpmo.org, you get this pop-up for Free Khalifa, and you just pop onto that, and then you get a whole web page that they've set up just about this case. And I'm not going to go through all of this right now, but I will say that I was out there not this past week, but the week before, when they had the first hearing. It was supposed to be a hearing, an evidentiary hearing, to look at evidence of his innocence, and they came to an understanding that the state had corrupted the evidence that they wanted to test for DNA, and that made it inaccessible, unusable in the hearing. And what happened next was they came to an agreement. The judge and the defense anyway came to an agreement that he would plea to a lesser offense, maintain his innocence, and then be able to continue to fight, but accept a life without parole sentence. By the end of the day, the state challenged that, and it was thrown out, and they ended up having that evidentiary hearing this past Wednesday. And we may not hear the results of that hearing for a couple of weeks, maybe even in just a day or two before that execution. So we don't know what's going to happen for Khalifa in Missouri. And anyway, look at that webpage, take the action on the death penalty action petition, also on the MADP Missourians Against the Death Penalty petition, and stay tuned because there'll be a lot of action to be taken. That's one of the cases that's getting a lot of attention from the national movement and the international movement. The Innocence Project is a part of that. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution and the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and the Intercept are all writing about that case. But you know what? Nobody's talking about Travis Mullis. And that's, Jeff, if I'm correct, he is a volunteer, right? Travis is volunteering. He's waiving his appeals. He's not asking anybody to do anything. We, of course, always have a standard set of things that we do around executions, but there's no question of his guilt, apparently. And there's also, again, not a campaign about that case. So Death Penalty Action is doing what we do in every single case. We've got a petition, which will be delivered to the governor. And and to the Board of Pardons and Paroles in the days ahead of that execution. And there will be a protest and a vigil. And if both of those executions going forward, we'll have a simultaneous vigil, as we've done once before. And otherwise, it'll be, hopefully Marcellus will not get executed, and there'll be some other resolution in his case. And we'll see, we'll be watching to see what happens there. Any additional comments on either of those cases, Rick?
Yeah, just a word here. Again, getting back to this idea of numbers, and I, with you, Abe, of course, people are more than numbers, but round numbers are significant for media purposes. Let's put it this way, the next person put to death in the state of Missouri will be number 100 in that state in the modern era, that is to say from 1976 to the present. So if Marcellus Williams, Khalifa, is in fact put to death on the same night as Travis Mullis here, he will be the 100th person in the state of Missouri. Missouri will become the 5th state in the country to have put to death in the modern era at least 100 people. And if in fact that he is commuted to a life sentence, the idea it would be in December. I guess we'll talk about this in a bit, but just talking about it, briefly mentioning it, Christopher Collins, there is another execution set in Missouri this year on December the 4th. So it is dangerously likely that one or both of these may or will be carried out. So it appears likely that the state of Missouri will carry out its 100th execution in the modern era. And just projecting a bit, and then I'll stop for the moment, Travis Mullis will be the 590th person. It's just so appalling to talk about these numbers, but with multiple executions scheduled beyond Travis Mullis, one or two at the moment may be carried out, and this is projecting into next year. But as horrible as all of this is, Mullis will be number 590 in Texas. Texas carries out almost 40% of all U.S. executions, so that this state, given the pace of executions that it carries out on a yearly basis, even though the number is substantially reduced from what it was in the 80s and early 90s, Texas will hit the horrific number of 600 next year. But it's just to not forget these issues, which I think activists, certainly in Missouri and other states, should not hesitate to point out to media and other activists that these are serious numbers, because they all represent the infliction of premeditated pain and death in these states that many times. I'll stop with that, but thanks.
Well, thank you, Rick. I put a link in the chat there to the Travis Mullis petition and showed that briefly while Rick was talking. So, Rick, I had not noticed the fact that the next Missouri execution is going to be its 100th in that state, which is awful. So, with that, I don't see any questions in the chat, or here is a question in the Q&A. Patricia is asking if someone can set up the option in the chat that have been shared there to be saved. What we can do is, Allie, can you look into that? I'm not sure how that works, but we will figure that out. And the other thing is that you can get all of these links. We are unfortunately having a problem with the Death Penalty Action webpage. It's gotten some corrupted files and such, so it's currently off. But we set up a temporary page that is there's a link to it on our Facebook, and also I emailed it out this evening. We'll put that link in here too. And if you click on that, that's where you can get to each of the petitions that are being shared. And we will be saving these. We can send these out to everybody that's registered for tonight as well. So there's that. And let's see, that looks like it's all the questions. So the next person in line, and we've got a lot to talk about with this, with the next case, if those two executions happen, then, in South Carolina, then the fourth in that 6 days of executions will be Emmanuel Littlejohn. And there's a lot happening and a lot not happening, and we get to talk about that tonight. So with us, of course, is Reverend Dr. Jeff Hood, who is Emmanuel Littlejohn's spiritual advisor, has been in regular touch with him and his family, and especially these past few days, there's been a number of medical health concerns that Emmanuel has been suffering from. So Jeff, you want to fill us in on what's happening, and we'll talk a bit more about what our plans are this coming week and for the next few weeks around Emmanuel Littlejohn.
Yeah, thanks, Abe. I think that we are at a place with Emmanuel that is very difficult. And this isn't the first time that I've experienced this place. And that is when someone gets so sick in the days leading up to an execution or up to a decision about clemency or about the execution, that there are real questions as to whether or not on a health level they will be able to function long enough or perhaps be present enough to participate in the movement or the campaign to save their life. Emmanuel is someone who is very near and dear to me. We have worked together for almost 2 years now. I've been his spiritual advisor for almost 2 years. And in that time, I've experienced someone who loves his family very much, loves his grandkids very much, loves his daughter very much. He's incredibly funny, incredibly just a great big ball of humanity. And the interesting thing about speaking in such a way is that it is a counter narrative to what the state or the media would want to portray him as. This is someone who's made mistakes. There's no doubt about that. Participated in a robbery that led to the murder of a young, innocent person who was just doing their job. But at the same time, someone who didn't kill anybody, didn't pull the trigger. This is somebody who has certainly made mistakes. But here we are 30 years later, and we're being asked, the state is trying to make us think that it is appropriate to kill someone for something that they did 30 years ago when they are so sick that there is no way possible they could hurt anybody now. Manuel is confined to a wheelchair most of the time. He has trouble getting in and out of bed most of the time. He is in a situation where he is a severe diabetic. He has had multiple strokes. I mean, there's all sorts of things going on. And the state wants us to believe that it is necessary to kill him. That it is necessary to kill him. Emmanuel was granted clemency a few weeks ago based on the fact, various facts, but certainly the fact that he didn't kill anyone was up there. We made that argument on billboards, in the press, everywhere we could turn. And in making that argument, we were able to give Emmanuel a chance. Fight for him to have this chance. And that chance is right now, Governor Stitt has in his hands the opportunity to save Emmanuel's life. Clemency in Oklahoma is a two-step process. It's first recommended or denied by a board. If it is recommended, then it is sent to the governor to make a final decision. Emmanuel was approved on the first round through the board, and now we're at the final decision. So I think that it's so important that we begin to realize that it is possible that Governor Stitt could not do anything. He doesn't have to make a decision. In fact, with Philip Hancock, we are very aware that he waited until the very last second, and they called and they asked, what's your decision as far as clemency is concerned? And instead of saying that he's denying clemency, he said that there are no impediments, there's nothing standing in the way of executing him. So this is a space in which the governor doesn't have to even answer. Well, I can tell you this, for me, for those who love Emmanuel, for Emmanuel himself, it's not enough to stand back and say, okay, well, we're just going to see if you answer or not. I'm not trying to cause anybody to get angry. I'm not trying to push the governor into a place of obstinance. But I do think we have to remind Governor Stitt that we have a board decision that says that Emmanuel is deserving of clemency. And it is his responsibility to act on that recommendation. And even beyond that, to act favorably on that recommendation. And so in the coming days, we are going to be pushing out a number of actions. The first in the coming days, the first action is going to be a campaign based around Emmanuel's health. We want the governor, we want people in Oklahoma to know that Emmanuel is sick, and that if they choose to execute Emmanuel, it will be that they have chosen to execute someone who is very sick, who could in no way harm anybody. So in the coming days, Allie, we're going to put out a graphic later on tonight. We're going to make sure that people have access to that graphic to share these initial phone calls, that letters and whatnot. In the coming days, we're going to expect those that are written, those who contact the governor, to contact the governor based on Emmanuel's health and saying clemency should be granted based on the fact that this person is very sick. Then as time goes on, I don't want to give too much of our strategy away, but as the week goes on and as we get closer to the execution date, we are going to ramp up with more letters, more phone calls, more of a push. And the closer we get, the more we will ramp up. I think that we could spend all night sitting here thinking, well, maybe if we just sit around and don't do anything or don't say anything, maybe he'll do the right thing. I've asked Emmanuel what he wants to do. I'm very, very determined that these campaigns be driven by the guys that they are functioning for. And Emmanuel told me 2 nights ago, he said, Jeff, I want you and all the activists and all your crew out there to know that I'm letting you off the chain. I am letting you off the chain. Again, we're going to be smart, but I want you to pay attention. Keep your eyes open to emails, graphics, the things that are coming, because we do have a very defined strategy. as to how we are going to say, Governor Stitt, you got to make a decision. And Governor Stitt, we expect that to be a favorable decision.
Thank you, Jeff. And I want to add, here is the petition, and the link has been posted in the chat. Excuse me. And you can see we're going to be adding to this some of the issues. There is a link within this to somewhere. Maybe it comes when after you sign the petition. We'll get it up here to the set of resources that are available. You can see also that we have continued to have, this was the first round of the billboard that was up. We've adjusted it. It now says Save Emmanuel Littlejohn, but we've got 10 billboards up in the Oklahoma City area. And also we're encouraging people to watch and share the video. And just because we're here and we're talking about Emmanuel, I'm going to show the video. It's just 3 minutes. Check this out.
Hey, Abe,
yes.
Can you wait just a second?
Yes.
Before you start the video, I wanted to quickly say I talked to Miss Seeley this afternoon. Miss Seeley is Emmanuel's mother. And I let her know that tonight we were, they're worried about Emmanuel. They're worried about how he's feeling, his health. And I assured her tonight on this conversation, this forecast, that we would say, take a second to say a quick prayer for Emmanuel. So if we could take just a second of silence, quietness, and then I'll close this out. God, we approach you tonight with heavy hearts for our dear brother, Emmanuel Littlejohn. God, we know that it is not just our hearts that are full tonight, but we know that your heart is full as well. God, we are asking for a mighty work of your hands. We pray that Emmanuel will know comfort and healing from the top of his head to the tips of his toes, even right now. God, we pray for clemency. We pray for mercy. God, we pray for clemency and we pray for mercy. God, I pray for Governor Stitt. I pray that you'll help him not to sleep, God. I pray that you will help him not to be able to function, God. I pray that you will be after his heart so that he will know that he doesn't have to kill Emmanuel Littlejohn. That Emmanuel Littlejohn deserves clemency. God, we pray that you will intervene in a mighty, mighty way. We thank you for being the God who hears us. Amen.
Amen. And, we would add also prayers for everybody facing execution, not just Emmanuel. And we'll do that in a little while. But let me just share with you again. This is on the petition webpage. Here's the video narrated by Emmanuel Littlejohn himself.
My name is Emmanuel Littlejohn, and I'm on death row for a crime that I didn't commit.
On June the 19th, 1992, Emmanuel Littlejohn and Glenn Bethany conspired to rob the Root and Scoot convenience store in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. As they entered the store, a tragedy developed that ultimately led to the murder of Kenneth Mears.
I went in, then Bethany came in, and then we held the place up. And the next thing you know, Mr. Mears coming down the aisle with something in his hand that looked like a gun. So I take off running. I go out the door, and next thing I know, I hear a shot. I thought somebody was shooting at me, but it was Bethany shooting off inside the store.
Glenn Bethany turned around and fired the shot that killed Kenneth Mears. In that moment, Emmanuel Littlejohn was already outside of the store. The reason we know that that shot was fired by Glenn Bethany is because witnesses across the street described the taller man as the shooter and the shorter man as not being the shooter. That shorter man was Emmanuel Littlejohn.
I get back to the apartment. They started telling us that Mr. Beard had died. So I said, Bethany, they told me that you killed the man. He said, I was just shooting at him to make him jump backwards, but I must have hit him.
Littlejohn is scheduled to be executed, having never fired a single shot.
I never said I wasn't a part of the robbery, because I've always said that from the start that I was there. I'm the only one on death row that has been for 30 years, but I haven't killed nobody.
Oklahoma, we need your help. Emmanuel Littlejohn is scheduled to be executed in the coming days. The only person who can lead the way to stop this execution is Governor Kevin Stitt. Governor Stitt can be reached at 405-521-2342. We need you to dial this number incessantly and demand an end to this effort to execute a man who has never killed anyone.
So, watch for more. And I do want to note, somebody mentioned their pen pal that is cellmates with Emmanuel, Raymond Johnson, who we've got on our blog when it's available, a lot of his comments, but he's been a powerful influence for many folks, including Emmanuel, and we're grateful to him. He's essentially functioning as a healthcare worker for Emmanuel, helping him deal with all of his daily needs, because Emmanuel has had multiple strokes and has some debilitating issues. And I want to note that if they end up executing him, they're going to wheel him into that death chamber in a wheelchair. We don't need to execute this guy at all. So with that, any other thoughts, questions? There was a question in the chat from Abu Masin about a case in Arizona, and I don't have the answer to that question because we're not following cases that don't have set execution dates that closely. So don't know the answer, and I'm sorry about that. But he's wondering if anybody does know what's the situation with Aaron Gunches in an execution warrant in Maricopa County in Arizona. What I can say about Arizona is two things. One is the Attorney General there is trying to resume executions, and a bunch of people are lined up against that idea. So we're going to hope that does not happen in the coming months. The other thing is that a woman named Jasmine, a death penalty action supporter from Germany, called me yesterday with some bad news in Arizona. I can't share the person's name yet, unless it's in the public or been released already, which I don't know. But there was a suicide yesterday or Friday on Arizona death row. And I was able to share that information with Kat Jutras, who's the director out at the Death Penalty Alternatives for Arizona, which is the state group in Arizona. And she actually put out a message yesterday about that had happened. And also, Jasmine got back to me, and this is pretty remarkable, I think, to share that, originally they were on lockdown when that was happening. But then they opened the doors and they let the men come together, and they made sure that everybody had a chance to speak with a counselor. And the nurses went and checked on each prisoner, which is, you don't really expect or see that kind of checking in with people in a space like that. So, as awful as it is, I wanted to share that happened. That's the situation going on there. So with that, now we'll turn to the final execution of the 5 that are set in this calendar month. And that is Alan Miller in Alabama. And as with the situation in Missouri, we don't have anybody that's joined us from Alabama tonight, but I can tell you, and I know Jeff has some insight on this too, this will be, if it happens, the second gas suffocation execution in Alabama and in the United States ever. Alan Miller, just about 2 years ago, it'll be 2 days shy of 2 years from the time that they tried to execute Alan Miller the first time. And he was poked and cut down and went through all manner of the torture that it is. Death row itself is torture. Facing a death sentence is torture. But actually being on the execution gurney while they're trying to poke you and get an IV set up, having them fail and send you back to your cell. That's what happened to Alan Miller. And like they did to Kenny Smith earlier this year, now they're going to do that to Alan Miller. There's sadly no litigation pending that we're aware of in that case, unlike with Kerry Grayson, who is the next person scheduled to go in Alabama, also by gas. His attorneys are fighting and challenging the method of execution. The attorneys for Alan Miller are simply trying to make sure that he gets a mask that's fitted properly ahead of time. So what's happening with that and why they've made a choice to go in that direction, we don't know. But we also do know about Alan Miller is that he's pretty much keeps to himself, sits, watches a lot of TV, drinks a ton of soda, and is just waiting for his day to die, it would seem. Nevertheless, we are looking at how do we raise up attention to that case. And if it does come to be that all of these executions that we've talked about, South Carolina, Texas, Missouri, Oklahoma, that'll make this gas suffocation execution the 1600th execution. So let me share again just quickly the petition. Ali, if you could put the link into the chat. We've got, here we go. So there's the petition for Alan Miller. And I can tell you while I show you this that we are working to make sure that there is attention given to this case throughout the state of Alabama. We plan to be traveling and carrying out on events, public events, where people and the media can come and hear about this in Alabama in the days prior to September 26th. So that's what's happening there. And Jeff and Rick, if you have anything you want to add about Alan Miller before we get to the next part of our conversation, or any questions as well.
No, I think, again, I just want to recap. I'm just right quick, these dates: September 20th, 2 on September 24th, potentially 2 on September 24th, and 2 more, both potentially on September 26th. So on anybody's calendar, this is a horrible week. One is horrible, but we nationally are now looking at a potential of 5 executions within 7 days. Again, 1 on the 20th, 2 on the 24th, 2 on the 26th, just for everybody's calendars.
Yes, and then just for the record, I'll note that in October, we have one on October 1st, Garcia White, October 17th, Robert Robertson, and then a couple in November and December. We talked about Kerry Grayson a little bit, and Rick also mentioned Christopher Collings in Missouri. But if none of these are halted, then Alan Miller is the 1900th, and if one of them are, then we're looking at possibly Robbie Robertson, who is another person that's innocent and getting a ton of attention because he's on the spectrum, and because of his mannerisms, they said he didn't have any emotion. His kid is dead. Why isn't he showing emotion? He must be the killer. That's a big part of the story. And now everybody is saying he's innocent, and there just isn't even a mechanism to bring that in front of a court. And we're going to see how that plays out. But in any case, it's just astounding what's going on. I do want to note, Melvin in the chat said the state should not get a do-over. I would agree with you on that. I will say that in Ohio, we've had a couple of cases like that where they sent the guy back to his cell after not being able to establish a case. And in the case of Ramel Broom, who sadly died of COVID while on death row, but he was one of those people that was sent back to his cell after 18 pokes that they couldn't get an IV started. And the Ohio Supreme Court said that because they hadn't started the drugs, they hadn't started the execution, which of course is BS. The execution starts when they wheel you into that death chamber. And the threat of execution, the torture of execution starts from the moment a cop says, you're going to fry for this. But in any case, what we have here now is the situation of they do get a do-over. So with that, let's shift to the conversation about this question of what do we do. Rick?
Yeah, sorry, but I just wanted to add something before we get to that, because I think it's important. It's come out that states have said on some of these impending executions, and out in Idaho, which is not on this list at the moment, but the states adhere to the following, that these, and you said correctly, that these executions all constitute torture, for sure. Cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment and punishment. And the states have put forward, and they uphold this, that an inmate, and I want to say this slowly because it's mind-boggling to read and hear, that an inmate on death row facing execution is not entitled to a painless execution. Many of these methods have been horrifically botched. As you say, Romel and many others, Doralham in Alabama, many others have been sent back to their cells or just died horrific, gruesome, painful deaths on a gurney. The idea that an inmate is not exempt from a painless execution is mind-boggling. The state's position is, while they are not exempt from a painless execution, the state must have an intent not to cause a painful execution. And if that's all states rely on, however terribly botched many of these executions are, and it may happen with some of the people that are on this list that we're speaking about tonight and beyond. However gruesome it may be to witness or for the inmate to endure, the state, all it has to do is to prove that it did not have a malicious intent to cause such suffering. So I just want to let us remember that however painful this may be, that is the mentality of states, that inmates are not guaranteed a painless execution. Just food for horrific thought.
Well, thank you for filling us in on that, Rick. You mentioned Idaho. There was an article the other day. Abu has put that into the chat about just the some of the interesting arguments that are being made to try to forestall execution. So in Idaho, Thomas Creech's attorneys, he is the person that was on the table, and they poked him a number of times, and they weren't able to effect that execution. And we know the state wants to try again. Well, the attorneys are arguing just that it's double jeopardy of some sort. I'm not sure exactly the right legal language, but that would be cruel and unusual to do that to him again. And they're actually talking about some of the post-traumatic stress that he is currently and his family are being treated for. So that's the situation there. What's the state? There's another state that, in South Carolina, another one of the arguments that's being made is that they should not be allowed to have more than one execution every 13 weeks. Because of how traumatic that is on everybody involved, and which could then lead to problematic executions. So we'll see where these things go. Again, we're in a space, and we talk about this almost every time, we're in a space where, what would have been a decade ago legitimate legal arguments being made that would get a hearing in court and would forestall executions, now they're being dismissed out of hand. And it's almost as if it doesn't matter how good your attorneys are, the courts are set up to not hear the arguments and to just grease the rails and get us to the execution chamber. And it's just going to get worse. And again, we've had 3 states now seek to resume executions, and others are on the verge. Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee hasn't been off for that many years, but it's just a matter of time there, and other states as well. Arkansas has had an execution, and I don't know how long, but it's been quite a while, 2017 maybe. It would have been 2017 in Arkansas. So there's just many states that have the death penalty, aren't carrying out executions, and some are trying to resume. So we'll see where all that goes. In any case, I mentioned earlier when Hillary Taylor was on from South Carolina that on the 500th execution, a bunch of us blocked the road going into the prison and were arrested in doing that. We risked arrest. I was a part of that. Rick, were you a part of that one in South Carolina? No. And then at the 1000th execution, that was in North Carolina, and we approached the prison. And the way it is there, you're up on a hill. It goes down into the parking area and the reception area for the prison. And a bunch of us just started walking down there, and they arrested us for that, just for being present without warning. They just grabbed us and arrested us. And some of us spent a night over almost most of the night in jail. On the 1500th execution, that was in Georgia, I believe, and there was not a direct action that resulted in risking arrest, but there was actions, and people took action all over the world around that one. We made up a special banner for that. Drew a lot of people took extra attention to that, and that's what we're going to try to do with this as we continue this countdown. We're not exactly sure where it's going to be, but if it could be in Alabama, it could be in Texas, could be it's likely to either be Alabama or Texas, actually, as the 1600th execution. So we'll see. We're not exactly sure what the plan is beyond making sure that there's an extra spotlight on it and that people are talking about this. Other ideas, please put them in the chat. Questions, put them in the chat. Panelists, Charles, Jeff, Ali, Rick, thoughts on what do we do?
Hey, Abe, I've always said with myself and fighting for my brother, it became a spiritual war. There was no other options. I had to get out. I had to go to the churches. I had to find out where everybody stood on this particular topic. And I think that, not to attack the churches or any particular religions, but we need to know where people stand at on this subject. This is a movement. This is a spiritual movement. This is not just personally, how do you feel about the death penalty? We're talking about people's lives and having other humans with the ability to take those lives and demonstrate their cruelty. So I realized that, and that's what started taking my life into that spiritual piece of starting to understand, what love really meant, and that meaning, my neighbor and not willing to take my neighbor's life. So I just think it's time to just start knocking on some of these church doors, maybe go sit in some of these churches, hear some of these sessions, and find out not just some of the good people that's in those churches, but are those churches standing with us too? I think that's very critical. I think the pastor, if he's preaching over somebody, and this is his flock, are you and your flock standing together, especially on this particular subject? Because this is a movement. And every movement that we've ever had in our country, it always ended up in war. And I think this is a war also, but it's a different type of war. This is where you pick your spirit up off the ground and get moving and get doing something about it, because we're still losing people all the time while we're still trying to figure out what to do. And I think it's time to start knocking on some of those churches' doors. After all, that's where the politicians go. That's where you catch a lot of highly educated people. That's where you start meeting people. And, that just might be the direction, we have to start doing. Some of our rallies, we just have to do some of that Sunday stuff or catch them or do some of our things at these churches, but we've got to pull them in as allies.
Yeah, thanks, Abe. I think you were on mute there, but thanks. I'd certainly second what Charles just said, and I would like to add perhaps this perspective. As everybody here knows that's either on the panel or joining any of the participants, the death penalty must be a visible issue. It has to. The biggest sin that is committed is when activists don't make or keep this issue visible, and especially with our local media and beyond. I don't think it's sufficient just to wait in the 6 states or so who are facing impending execution: South Carolina, Texas, Missouri, Alabama, Oklahoma. It's not sufficient just to be dealing with media in those or these states. I do think that all of us, we are about 6 weeks out from this bloodbath to commence potentially on September 20th. And everything that we have been talking about here should be contextually being reported on by media across this country, not just in states where an inmate is waiting to be killed. We need more national media, whatever that form is, whether it's the major media, the New York or LA Times, the Washington Post, papers that have reported on this, NPR. There isn't any media which shouldn't be contacted with op-eds, with interviews with people who are on this call and others participating. We are the knowledgeable folks on this issue, and many others who aren't on this call. This is our job. So in addition to bringing this issue contextually to the media, I would just like to add a corollary to what Charles said in working with and reaching out to different faith communities. Let's not forget that the professional community, which is heavily responsible for this nightmare, is the legal community, because all of this is done in the name of the law. Now, while we all know and work with lawyers who are trying to represent these folks and working for the abolition of the death penalty across America, it is their brethren, their brothers and sisters legally, who keep this system functioning. So the legal community has to be educated, as does the mental health community, but especially the legal community. They cannot be let off the hook. And the last thing I would like to say as a reminder is this. As everybody here, or many may know, the new, because we are in an election year, and of course that's going to be arguably the major story as we get closer to early November, when people go to the polls and express their preference for Harris or Trump. But let us not forget the Democratic Party platform this year is the first Democratic Party platform in 20 years, which is no longer supporting the abolition of the death penalty in this country. Now, we all know that Trump has said that he will resume federal executions and wants to expand the death penalty into another nightmare if he is elected. But even if Harris is elected, the Democratic Party, at least for this election, has abandoned the moral high ground on this issue. So I do think it is imperative for all activists, whatever your party affiliation, to reach out to legislators in their states and especially their federal legislators to urge the Democratic Party to reinstate or recommit to the moral high ground of abolition. Abolition is a part of the criminal justice system. And the Democrats, sadly, have been the major party in the last 2 decades or more that appear to have given credence to wanting to reform the American criminal justice system. And they, meaning the Democrats, at a local level, a state level, or a national level, must be re-engaged to recommit their party to the moral high ground that is abolition of the death penalty. And I think this is our job as activists to lead that effort to the moral high ground. Thanks.
I just wanted to, there was a question in the Q&A chat that I just wanted to read and ask Abe if you had any information on Joseph Corcoran in Indiana.
No date has been set yet. That's all we know.
Okay.
Well, I do want to add, we are watching and working with our folks in Indiana and making sure that there will be a robust opposition to resumption of executions there. I also want to say that several people have sent me a note about the New York Times editorial that we sent out. It was published yesterday morning electronically in today's print paper. The New York Times calling for Joe Biden to do all he can to dismantle the federal death penalty, which is what we have been calling for since 2017. We have to amplify that. That's why what we asked yesterday morning in an email, if you receive our emails, you would know we asked people print out that and mail it in the postal mail to the White House. Just to help amplify that and make sure. I can tell you that Death Penalty Actions Board Chair, Reverend Sharon Risher, the killer of her mother and 2 cousins among a total of 9 people killed by Dylann Roof in Charleston, South Carolina in 2015. She's the chair of our board, and she has personally hand-delivered our organizational letter, with over 312 organizations on it now, to the president, to senior advisors, asking them. And in addition, once they set, what's happening now is all of the prisoners on federal death row are actually filling in their clemency applications. And we know this because the Department of Justice is reaching out to the victim families and saying, what do you think? Should this person get mercy? And seeking the comments of the victim families. And we know that because they reached out to Reverend Risher. And she told them, you should commute Dylann Roof's sentence. And if you're going to do him, you got to do them all. Because arguably between him and Dotan Tsarnaev, the Boston bomber, the killer of her mother is one of the most notorious people and the most well-known people on federal death row. There's some people with strong innocence claims on federal death row, Most of the people there are guilty of what they were convicted of or something close to it. And in any case, we're asking the president to commute all of those sentences. I do want to say that, and Rick is right, it's as if this is going to be an issue in the election. What we know from past elections is that very, very, very few people choose how they're going to vote based on a candidate's position on the death penalty. It's just really not an issue in the election. I would venture from a strategic point of view to say that, and this is not being an apologist for the Democrats, I'm not a member of that party, but what I will say is that there's a lot of things in the platform that are not said, that we know are values of the people that are part of that party and part of that even that platform committee. And what I will also say is that action, to me, speaks louder than words. And on the fourth night of the Democratic Party convention, you had Al Sharpton get up with 4 out of the 4 surviving members of the Central Park Five, and they said unequivocally, they called out Donald Trump for his use and support of the death penalty. And I think that if the Democratic Party is putting that up on the stage in their national convention, we know where their hearts are at. We don't know. And keep in mind, if you read the Democratic Party platform, as I have done, it still says Joe Biden, Joe Biden, Joe Biden, because they haven't updated it. So whatever that's about, whatever, it doesn't matter. What matters is what they do. And what they did do is put the issue front and center in their fourth night of their convention, the night that Kamala Harris, a prosecutor, was going to speak, and they put up 4 people that Donald Trump paid for full-page ads to calling for the death penalty for them. And even today, after they've been exonerated by DNA, he still says that they're guilty, which that sets apart. And by the way, death penalty action can't and doesn't take a position on on how people should vote. We just invite you to be aware of where people stand on the issues as a matter of public policy. So I wanted to make sure we're clear about that. We have our work cut out for us. We also, I would argue, as a strategist, as a campaigner, as an organizer, we don't really want to make this a huge thing before the election, but we do want to be ready immediately following the election to demand that Joe Biden do what he can and continue to do what he can. By the way, he's been taking a lot of guff because he hasn't acted yet. And again, I'm sure that is strategic, but what he did do, the action that he did take is he halted the federal executions. We haven't had a single one. And he appointed an attorney general who, even during his confirmation hearing, said this administration does not want executions. So that's an action in and of itself, even if it's not everything that we want to see. And so I just want to put that on the table. It's not everything we want to see. We're never going to get everything that we want to see, but we haven't seen a single federal execution, and hopefully we will not. And the argument that we're making to Joe Biden is take it off the table, either so President Harris doesn't have to deal with federal executions or President Trump can't. So those are my thoughts on that. And then back to, thanks, Rick, I see your thumbs up. Back to the issue at hand. We're going to be counting down. We're going to be watching each of these executions. Death penalty action is going to make sure there is visible, vocal opposition for each of these executions, whether it's one of the high-profile ones, like in Missouri or in Oklahoma, or if it's one of the ones that nobody's talking about, like in Texas or in Alabama. So that's what our job is, and that's what all of us together get to do. So any further final thoughts from our panel? Any further questions in the chat? I like that, Aaron. Execute greed, not people. What's Andrea saying? Jesus wouldn't have planned an execution spree either. That's right. Amen. I'd say that as a fellow Jew. Jesus was Jewish. Let's remember that. So with that, this has been The Forecast. We do this every first Sunday of each month, and we'll probably do the next one on on September 29th because there was an execution on the 1st. And we'll see where Robbie Robertson is at that point, and if any others have it updated. So let's just make that call right now. Ali will do the next forecast for October on September 29th. So y'all get that notice right now. And with that, again, hopefully we'll get our, excuse me, the death penalty action web page will be fixed, I hope, by tomorrow. But if it's not, here is the link for that. You can grab this or click on it right now. I think Ali's put it in before, but that's our temporary action page right there. And it looks like this. I'll just show you as we line up our farewell, our video for heading out tonight. So this is what we've got. It's just a Google page. It's very simple. You can donate. You can click on each of these petitions, and with this, what you got to do is click on it, and then you get the link, and you got to click on that, and then that's how that works to get to the petitions. But with that, I want to share with you, since Suzanne is in the audience somewhere, this song from Brandon Pfeiffer. Brandon Pfeiffer, who, again, we're grateful for you, Brandon, for showing up yet again to bring us into a space of tranquility and prayer, and thank you.
Let there be peace on earth. Let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth. Peace that was meant to be. With every step that I take, this is my solemn vow. Let peace begin with me in this moment now. Let there be peace on earth. Let it begin with us. There will be peace on earth when we all speak up. We see life and death, we see right and wrong, we see eternal choices that can't be undone. With every step we take, let this be a solemn vow to find peace on earth, starting right now. Let there be peace on earth. Let it begin with us. There will be peace on earth when we all speak up. It's time we all speak up. It's time that we speak up.